Please, ma'am.
Good evening to one and all. It's really a pleasure in welcoming all. This is a joint venture by the Center of Archaeology under the Center for Extramural Studies, University of Mumbai, Directorate of Archaeology and Museums, Government of Maharashtra, Department of Ancient Indian Culture, Sathe College, Mumbai, and Pradaya Heritage Management Services. Just now, we were speaking to our today's guest, Professor Swadhin Sen, who is a professor in archaeology from Bangladesh. And he said that title of this lecture series is very catchy, Know Your Neighbors. Because that is how you come to know so many things about your neighboring countries. Otherwise, you do not know or you have no chance to know about them. So we are very happy our effort to know our neighbors, and it's our privilege to have two international organizations with us in conducting this series. Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center, Embassy of India, Yangon, Myanmar, and Swami Vivek Center, High Commission of India, Colombo, Sri Lanka. On behalf of all these collaborators, I extend very hearty welcome to our today's guest, Professor Swadhin Sen, an archaeologist of international repute, hailing from I am very grateful to Dr. Sen for his consent to give one presentation in this lecture series and accepting our invitation. Indian continent and all the neighboring countries, that is something like a larger family, and it's a Bangladesh, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, and Afghanistan. The Center for Extramural Studies and Center of Archaeology. We every day celebrate Archaeology Day on 10th of December in honor of late Dr. H.D. Sankalia, father of archaeology in South scholar in numismatics, late Dr. P.L. Gupta. So celebrating these 2 days is annual feature of our department, but we also have the opportunity to invite the scholars online and listen to these great personalities working in the field of archaeology. So we thought of creating the series of programs and one of programs in this series is which will be presented by Dr. Swadhin Sen. Along with me, we have Dr. Prachi Moghe, my colleague in the Center for Extramural Studies, uh, Mr. Anand Kanetkar from Pradaya, and Dr. Suraj Pandit from Sathe College, Mumbai. With all the hosts present in this meeting and our audience waiting for the presentation by Dr. Sen, I request my colleague Dr. Prachi Moghe to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Swadhin Sen.
Oh,
So once
thank
again,
you,
hearty
Professor.
welcome to all of you. Once again, hearty welcome to all of you, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Menal ma'am. It is my privilege to introduce today's speaker, Professor Swadhin Sen. Professor Swadhin Sen is a professor in Department of Archaeology, Jahangir University, Dhaka, Bangladesh. He did his PhD on the topic on field archaeology and geoarchaeology in present Dinajpur, Jaipurhat districts under a co-directed program between Jahangir University and University of Lyon. His research areas are public archaeology, archaeology of rivers, archaeology of religion and rituals, politics of the past, and critical studies on heritage. So it is very interesting to know more about archaeology in Bangladesh. And Professor Swadhin Sen is the right person to know about the archaeology in Bangladesh. He has published many articles in many reputed journals, national and international journals, and he will talk today on archaeology in Bangladesh, recent studies, contested perspectives. So I request Professor Swadhin Sen to deliver today's lecture. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Prachi. I am really humbled, and it is my privilege to be a part of this lecture series, which is commemorating Shankalia sir and Gupta sir. So I would like to thank all of you for inviting me to this lecture series, and especially Dr. Suresh Pandit and one of my friends from Deccan College. And it's very difficult to take the burden of representing one's own country in any aspect of our research work. And as Dr. Prachi Moge is very kind to say that I am the right person, I don't consider myself the right person. I am just a student of archaeology. And I will try my best to present some of the recent works of archaeology from Bangladesh. And I must I must say that Bangladesh has archaeological sites and archaeological remains from different periods. So in a within a duration of 60 minutes or 70 minutes, it will not be possible to present all of the aspects of our archaeological research and archaeological works. And more importantly, I have some disclaimers at first, very briefly, that archaeology as a practice is mainly field-based, and it is not an individual job. So it's a teamwork. So when I am talking today, it's basically I am representing my entire team, and I am thankful to my entire team. Especially, I would like to mention some of them. For example, Professor Syed Muhammad Kamrullah Hassan, Abir bin Kaisar, Afroza Khan Mita, Saifur Rahman, who are not now our students anymore. They are working in the Department of Archaeology under Ministry of Cultural Affairs. And Ahmed Sharif, Muhammad Kamal Hussain Akand, and many other students who have been part of our work, and our colleagues Sabikun Naha Shethi, Dr. Sima Haq, and Professor Mujammil Haq. All of these people are collectively working since 20 years in Bangladesh in different areas and different fields. Our team was working in the northwestern part of Bangladesh, and for the last 2 or 3 years, we are also associated with the Department of Archaeology's work in the Regional Directorate of Khulna indirectly. And I would also like to thank, I will also use some photographs and drawings from Franco-Bangladesh Archaeological Mission at Mahasthangarh. I would like to thank Professor Jean-François Sall and the Franco-Bangladesh Mission at Mahasthan. I would also like to thank Government Department of Archaeology, Ministry of Cultural Affairs. I am also going to use some of the photographs with their permission. And some individuals are also working with us, or they have also supported us. I would also, I am thanking all of them from my heart. And I will also refer, when I talk, we, that is, I am representing the team. So first, I would like to show you the location and the landscape context and the geographical context of Bangladesh. We all know about Bangladesh, but I don't know whether this landscape and the geology and the geography of Bangladesh are familiar with everybody. So here, I would also like to use the highlighter. In the Indian context, this is the North India, and that is Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, West Bengal, and in the north of Bangladesh, we have Assam and Meghalaya of India, and the east of Bangladesh, we have Tripura, state of Tripura of India, and Bangladesh has a very interesting geographical location. It is interesting because of the fact that in the northern side, we have the Himalayan range, or Himalayan piedmont zone. On the west, to certain extent, we have Choto Nagpur Plateau region, and on the east also we have the fringe of Himalayan zone, and to the south we have Bay of Bengal. And it is very well known that Bangladesh is a land of rivers and water. And historically, this zone or this region has always been disliked by the people who are coming from the coming from different parts of the world, or different parts of even Indian subcontinent, because of the monsoon climate, because of the rivers, because of the humidity, because of the summer rain. So I was just watching the presentation yesterday by Dr. Noor of Afghanistan. The landscape of Afghanistan is completely different than the landscape of Bangladesh. So our archaeology, I must confess that our archaeology cannot be taught without its relationship with the water and river. And that is the most important point I would like to mention first. And you can see the main rivers of Bangladesh in the central photograph. That is Padma, it is Ganges in the Indian part. And these Ganges, I will mention briefly in my discussion, that this Ganges river went through several avulsions, a shift throughout the last 2000 years. And there is also Brahmaputra river. You all know about Brahmaputra river, which is coming from the Tibet and Assam and Meghalaya region. And in Bangladesh, it is known as Jamuna river. And Brahmaputra river is also very famous or notorious, whatever aspect, is known for its avulsion. And both these rivers with many other rivers are combined into Meghna rivers. And then the rivers with its huge catchment area has made Bay of Bengal. So the entire rain in the Himalayan piedmont zone is drained through these rivers of Bangladesh. And in the southern part, we have very active delta. And this delta is also very famous for the location of the one of the World Heritage Site, Natural World Heritage Site, Sundarban. So Bangladesh is known along with West Bengal, India, as the Ganges Brahmaputra Meghna Delta. That is, in short, we call it GBM Delta. And it is very active, it is very dynamic, and rivers are continuously shifting, and human settlement here and human activities here are conditioned by these aspects of the water and river. And in the right slide, you can see the some of the major and minor rivers of Bangladesh. You can see that it is like a pattern of network. And I have divided my presentation in two parts. First, I thought that I can present my presentation in a descriptive manner, that I will select some sites from Bangladesh and present it to the wider audience. Then I thought it a little bit differently, that I have divided my lecture in two parts. In the first part, I will review briefly about the archaeology of Bangladesh and its context. And in Bangladesh, like any other part of South Asia, the historical periodization is dominated by the ruling dynasties. We uh, uh, call the periods according to the ruling dynasty, like Mauryan period, like Gupta period, like Shunga period. In Bangladesh also, the dominant trend of talking about history in archaeology is basically the periodization according to the dynastic chronology, which is very problematic, and I will show that. And there are other kind of periodization, which is also very popular among the historians and also among the archaeologists. We call, especially in the historical archaeology period, that is, there is tripartite division, ancient, medieval, and modern. But we also use the periodization like early historic. We also use the periodization like early medieval or medieval. In Bangladesh, the periodization is basically, we are finding mostly the sites of early historic period, except some locations in the northeastern part, which is Sylhet, and in Kumilla, which is close to Tripura. We have found some fossil prehistoric tools, and our department has been the pioneer in finding them. Professor Syed Muhammad Kamrul Hassan, Professor Dr. Mojammel Haq, and Dr. Jayanto Singh Rai, they have worked together to find these interesting assemblies of fossil wood industry, which is more associated with the Meghalaya, Assam, Tripura, even the fossil wood or prehistoric assemblages from the Myanmar region. I will not talk about that because I am not expert on that topic. And in the periodization schema, we just follow early historic, that is 5th to 4th century BC to 3rd century C, early medieval, 7th century C to 13th century C, and in between, in some cases, we also consider the end of the Gupta period as the end of the early medieval period, and some of the scholars consider the beginning of the Gupta period as the end of the early historic period. And I must mention that there is no broad consensus regarding these periodization among the historians. Some historians or some archaeologists call the same period as early medieval, or some people are calling them as medieval. So we are calling medieval the advent of the Islam in Bangladesh, that is broadly the 13th century or 1206 CE. So most of the archaeological sites in Bangladesh are from early historic to medieval period, and it is distributed all over Bangladesh. There are different patterns of these distributions. And interestingly, there are recent works on at different parts of the site. I will go to the previous slide. In the northwestern part, the region or sub-region, we call it in the terminology of early medieval archaeology, it was known as Barenri. It was also known as Gaur, and this part was known as Shamotata, and present Chittagong was known as the Horikela, and the central part, along with the part in West Bengal, India, and the active deltic region in the southern part was known as Banga. And our history and archaeology and human activity is closely and associated with the activity definitely in the West Bengal, India, and eastern part of Bihar, India, and also with the Assam, Meghalaya, and Tripura zone of northeastern part of India. So historically, if we think, this entire region is closely associated in terms of human activity and the material remains. Even we have association with a greater part of present Bihar, from Pataliputra or Patna to present Bangladesh. And and the second part, I will try to show briefly some of our research which will show that some of the taken for granted ideas or assumptions about archaeology in South Asia and also in Bangladesh are problematic. So there are many questions. I will just present a few of the questions on the basis of our field work and our colleagues' work from Department of Archaeology in southwestern part of Bangladesh to raise those questions. And we are using in Bangladesh, our team, along with the French-Bangladesh mission at Mahasthan. The Mahasthan is in the Bareilly, northwestern part of Bangladesh. It's an urban center. And two of the teams from Agrashar Bikrampur Foundation and Oitijho Nation, they are also working in the central part of Bangladesh in Bikrampur, and one of the all historic site Wari Bateshwar. Government Department of Archaeology and also working in the central part of Bangladesh, Wari Bateshwar. And in this part, there is another very important and interesting cluster of archaeological sites, mainly Buddhist sites, which is known as Lalmai Moinamoti region in Chamotata area. And the southern part of Bangladesh is mostly ignored by the archaeologists because it was assumed that this part is new geologically, and there is no old remains earlier than medieval period. But during the recent researches and even by the early researches, which was ignored by most of the historians, like Satish Chandra Mitra worked in early 90s in the southern part of Bangladesh and southern part of present West Bengal, India. And he also mentioned some early sites, but most of the historians has regarded this area as the zone where human settlement began only in the medieval period. And I can talk about one of the most prominent and celebrated historians of our time, Richard Eaton, and who has written a very famous and that book received reward also, Rise of Islam in Bengal Frontier. He also based his thesis on this assumption that this zone, the southern part of Bangladesh, was only inhabited during the medieval period on around 14th, 15th century, which is completely wrong. And here I have already talked about these sub-regions of Bengal. And you all know that in the historiography or Indian history, you are very well aware of the debates regarding the periodization, especially the debates regarding feudalism, then segmentary state formation. Then there is a revision of those debates. And one of the historians who I consider as one of my guru, Professor Brajodulal Chattopadhyay and Harman Kulke, they have proposed a different parameters and ideas about early medieval period, which starts on around 7th century and which ends on around 13th century for some reason, and for some reason it continued up to 15th century. So during this period, the idea of sub-regions came into being according to their thesis, and there was new formation of regional identities. There was new state formation throughout South Asia. And after the disintegration of the Gupta Empire, which was very centralized, new states and new sub-regions were come into being. And most of the sites in Bangladesh belong to this early medieval period. There are some sites, like some urban centers, like Mahasthangarh, that I will show just in the next section. We are not finding any archaeological remains, whether it is monumental, whether it is material culture. They don't belong to the even to the Gupta period. Although we are finding many inscriptions, copper plate inscription from the late Gupta period, from the region which is known as Bareilly, the northwestern part of Bangladesh. And this region presently in the West Bengal, which was also known as the Gauro, and in the 7th century, it is famous for the ruling of King Shashanka, and he had a very interesting relationship with the Kanauj ruler Harshavardhan, and we know about all these stories from the textual sources. And in this map, you will see the sub-regions I have already mentioned in the Bengal. And for these sub-regions, according to the textual sources, these sub-regions came into being before 5th, 6th century. But the textual sources are always problematic, and they have some normative and prescriptive structures. We are not getting any archaeological evidence, even no epigraphic evidence, on the basis of which we can testify that these names were into being before 5th, 6th century. So for this moment, I am considering all these formations of sub-region during this early medieval period. So this is the historical, geological, and in a sense, social and political historical context of the Bangladesh I am talking about. And I am now starting with the Buddhist center I was talking about. I have shown in my earlier slide the Lalmai Moynamuti in southeastern part of Bangladesh. I will just briefly show some of the sites from this interesting cluster of monumental remains. These are mainly Buddhist monastic establishments, and already 7 Buddhist monastic establishments have been excavated by the Government Department of Archaeology under the Ministry of Cultural Affairs. I will show photographs and the ground plans of some of them. This is Shalbon Vihara, which was known as King Bhavadeva Vihara, according to the inscription found from the excavation. And I must mention that in Bangladesh, we can separate 2 distinct regions if we consider the Brahmaputra Jamuna River as the central point of reference. On the western side, the ruling dynasties was different during the early medieval period. We know about Pala rulers, we know about Sena rulers, and most of the normative history and dominant history are basically very well known for these kind of reference to the Pala, Sena, and even the material cultures are also referred in terms of these dynastic rules. Even the sculptures we are finding are referred to as Pala Sena school of sculpture. Scholars like Susan Huntington has referred a particular distinct style of sculpture or art in terms of Pala Sena school of sculpture, which is also very problematic because rarely the artistic medium changes according to the change in the dynastic chronology or according to the change of the rulers. And in the eastern part, which we are showing I am showing right now, the ruling dynasties was different. And from the early medieval period, we find Ratha dynasties, Chandra dynasties, Deva dynasties, Kharga dynasties, and so many dynasties in that part. And this part also is different in another way. Economically and cultural, in terms of cultural material, the western part is devoid of any metallic currency before the medieval period, that is before 13th century. But in eastern part, we are getting metallic currency since the early medieval period. So one of the famous scholars on these on these sources of economic and currency, Professor Dale, has identified the economy of Bengal in terms of dual monetary system. So dual monetary system means in one part of Bengal there was metal currencies and cowrie shells. In another part of Bengal or Bangladesh there was only cowrie shells. And there are many other differences also between this eastern part and western part. And there are similarities also in terms of material culture between the eastern part and western part. Here in Lalmai Moynamuti, we are getting mainly monasteries along with Buddhist temples. One of the temples have been definitely Brahmonical on the basis of the copper plate inscriptions. This temple, Charpatra Mura. And there is a very interesting cluster of Buddhist stupas, which is known as Kutila Mura. The central stupa is in the form of the Dharma Chakra of the one of the central symbol of the Buddhism, and you can see from the ground plan from the photographs the conditions and the spatial pattern of this Kutila Mura site. It is a very interesting site, not only for the architectural layout, also for the material culture which was recovered during this excavation. From these stupas, many clay votive stupas were recovered, which were encasted by charred bone. And there were also dedicatory inscribed clay tablets among the material cultural remains. And one of the famous Buddhist studies scholar, I am very fond of him, Gregory Chopin, has identified this phenomenon as very interesting. And you know Gregory Chopin's idea that textual, on the basis of textual source, the idea of Buddhism or Buddhist studies and the history of Buddhism is very problematic, and he has continuously explaining the limitations of textual sources, and he is emphasizing on the centrality of archaeological and epigraphic sources in the study of Buddhism. And he has referred to this particular finds in one of his articles as a very interesting funerary practice among the Buddhist monks or among the Buddhist laities in southeastern part of Bangladesh. And you will see in the bottom some of the interesting bronze sculptures which was recovered from this part of Lalmai Moynamut area. This is one of the largest images in Asia of Vajrasattva, and other images, large bronze bales. One of our colleagues has worked on the metallurgical aspects of these bronze bales, Sabikun Nahas Chithi. So this site has a very interesting position or location in the aspect of connectivity. And recently, many scholars have worked on this connectivity aspect of southeastern part of Bangladesh and the Southeast Asia. And for example, I can mention Professor Suchandra Ghosh, Professor Kenneth Hall, and many some of our friends from Calcutta, Dr. Rajat Sannal, Kaushik Gangopadhyay, Vishnupriya Bosak. They are also working in this coastal area of West Bengal, India. And Professor Suchandra Ghosh, Kenneth Hall, and many other scholars have shown that even some of the architectural features have influenced the architectural features of the southeastern part of Asia. And here I am showing some of the Buddhist temples from Myanmar, Cambodia, Indonesia, which was influenced by the cruciform temple architecture from definitely southeastern part of Bangladesh, and also from Sompura Mahavihara, which is in the northwestern part of Bangladesh. And also there is close association in terms of artistic technology and metallurgical production, like bronze sculptures. And Professor Suchandra Ghosh thinks that even despite the absence of this center in the textual sources, according to the material remains and archaeological remains, she thinks that this Lalmai Moinamoti area was one of the fourth largest or fourth most important Buddhist center during the period between 8th century and 13th century, and which has influenced many different aspects of human life, artistic activity, religious rituals, and exchange of ideas with Southeast Asian. And these are the things I will point in my second part. I am now beginning my second part. During our work throughout the last 20 years or so, we have found some of the difficulties in corroborating with the established history. For example, most of the archaeological research is confined to the big sites, structural sites or urban centers. And we are fascinated with the oldness of the archaeological remains. We try to find the oldest city, oldest urban center. So this is the dominating trend in archaeological research, possibly in South Asia, and it is very distinguishable in Bangladesh also. And another interesting discrepancies that we have found is the narrative based on the copper plate inscriptions. You know about copper plate inscriptions. These inscriptions are found from all over India. And in Bangladesh also, we are finding many copper plate inscriptions from Gupta period and also from the later early medieval period. And these inscriptions are the land grants or land sale documents. So this is I am now showing some of the archaeological sites, and along with that, I will also point at some of the problems with the established narratives, which is based basically on the textual sources or based basically on the we call it decontextualized understanding of material culture. By decontextualized, I mean that we emphasize only on the objects themselves. We don't emphasize their stratigraphic context or from their association with other objects. So mainly in Bangladesh, one of the dominating trend is the typology of material culture and understanding and interpretation of the material culture or objects on the basis of their formal attributes or basis of their stylistic attributes. And these dominating practice has some limitations, and we have found some problems, and some questions have been raised by our field work and by our work and also by others' work in different areas of Bangladesh. For example, Mahasthangarh is one of the urban centers in the northwestern part of Bangladesh. It was known as Pundranagara, and it was identified as the capital of Pundravardhana Bhukti. Excuse me. This A area is basically the Barindri, and Mahasthangarh is located right here. So Mahasthangarh, two of the sites from photos from Mahasthangarh, it is a fortified city. I prefer to call them as walled settlements. And Mahasthangarh is being studied for last 1 century and more. But we didn't have any well-built archaeological stratigraphy. The French Bangladesh mission at Mahasthangarh, which is working since 1993 till now, they have already published 2 very important and significant excavation report, and they have published chronometrically corrected and radiometrically supported stratigraphy of this entire site. And I must assert that any stratigraphy from any location or any site is not representative of the entire site, like Mahasthangarh, which is a huge one. And these are the sites associated with Mahasthangarh. And this is Mahasthangarh, part of Mahasthan Citadel. And this site is known as Vatsu Vihar, a cluster of monasteries outside the citadel. This site is, this structure is also very interesting. It is popularly known as Gokul made. It was built on a cellular pattern, which is very suitable for the alluvial context of Bangladesh, and it was possibly it went through two periods of transformation. From it was earlier a Buddhist temple, and then it was transformed into a Brahmanical temple. And there are many sites outside this walled area. These Mahasthangarh, you can see, and this is the map. This is the plan of Mahasthangarh, and French-Bangladesh joint excavation team has worked in the eastern part, eastern rampart area, the southern part in the Majar area, and also in the Boiragiri Bheti area. And we have stratigraphy from this eastern part, eastern rampart part, and they are now, as far as I have been informed, they are now working on this Majar part, and I will show some of the photos of this Majar part and some of the very interesting findings from their excavations. This is the one photograph from their excavation. These are some of the objects that were recovered from the excavation. A bronze mirror, possibly dated to the, according to the dominant terminology, Shunga period, that is earlier part of this millennium, and the Shungo terracotta plaques, which is very abundant in different all historic sites of the Bengal area. The Shunga terracotta plaques found from the Chandraketu Garh in West Bengal, India, is very famous worldwide. And from Mahasthan, they have found these terracotta plaques in abundance. This is the excavation of the Majar area. And I must thank Professor Jean-François and Frank Bangladesh Mission at Mahasthan for these photographs. And this is the rampart area, excavated rampart. And you can see the sliding or slanting of the ramparts. And I will explain this slanting a little bit later. This is one of the ground plan of the structural remains of this rampart area. These are the examples of the reuse of the materials. When one particular site or habitation is continuously used for more than 2000 years, people automatically will reuse the earlier materials. They dig pits, they take earlier construction materials and reuse them for the later construction works. These are the sections and some of the holes, post holes and other things from that excavation. This is a deep trench. This is very interesting. Some of the marks, crack marks and slanting and some of the fracture on the walls of the ramparts and other structures. And this is one street excavated in the Majar area. This is one bastion within the rampart. Bricks are the burnt bricks are the most important construction materials for our landscape. But we have occasionally and in some cases abundantly used stones which were collected from the Chotanagpur plateau in the Chhattisgarh and Jharkhand area. These cracks and the other features on the walls have been studied by the paleosismologists, and they have identified a very massive earthquake, and they have dated it to the mid 13th century. And according to their study, Mahasthangarh, the urban center, was partially or completely destroyed by this earthquake in 13th century. And these are another archaeological evidence. This is a sapping trench, a pit or a hole dug in the wall. And this is a sign of, according to their interpretation, the attack on the urban center on around 8th to 9th century. So they have identified, according to some of their recent publications, they have identified several events of attack on this site, even before the coming of the Turks and Afghans. According to the established history, we always blame the Turks and Afghans, or in broad sense, Muslims, for the destruction and for the massive destruction of the earlier religious remains or earlier sites. But according to the archaeological stratigraphy and interpretation, we are finding all these interpretations are false or problematic. Because before the 13th century, we are finding many evidences of transformations, attack, and destructions by different actors, which are either outsiders or from the same regions. These are the copper plate inscription and their locations, which are predominantly Gupta period sites in northwestern part of Bangladesh. And interestingly, these copper plate inscriptions are land sale grants from Gupta period, and in our history, we assume that Bengal was part of the Gupta Empire. On the basis of these inscriptions, which are basically very normative and structured, we have we are claiming that Bangladesh was part of the larger Gupta Empire. But according to our archaeological survey and excavation, this notion of Gupta annexation of Bengal is problematic, and we have also already published some of the some articles regarding these discrepancies and incoherences. And these inscriptions is basically later inscriptions. These are land grants by Palas and Chandras and all the other things, all the other ruling dynasties. This is an interesting stone inscription found from which was recovered from one of the sites in in the northwestern part of Bangladesh. So these find spots of Gupta copper plate inscriptions, we have tried to corroborate or correlate archaeological context with the find spots of these copper plate inscriptions. And interestingly, we haven't yet found any material culture, not even pottery, belonging to 5th century. Most of these Gupta copper plates are from 5th century, and we haven't yet found any archaeological remains from from that period. So that is a huge problem and interesting question for us. We are finding copper plate inscriptions, but we are not finding any corroborating archaeological material to support the claim that there were human habitation or human activities in this zone during 5th century CE. This is another important archaeological site in Bangladesh, and it is also inscribed as an World Heritage Site, the Sompur Mahavihara. This, unlike the monasteries in the Lalmai Moyanamoti area that I have shown, this monastery has been referred in the textual sources. And this monastic establishment is being excavated from several years. And we have this central temple and all the others, ground plans and monastic establishments, and the central temple is cruciform type. I have already mentioned about the cruciform type of temples in Buddhism and their influence in Southeast Asia. I will not go into the details of this structural and monumental aspects or art historical aspect. I will just mention one simple thing about the practice which we have called monument centrism. That is, we always emphasize on the structures or architectural remains, and we are not giving importance on their surroundings and on their association with other archaeological materials. Here we are finding in the central photo, we are finding an earlier structure which is not yet been identified, which was built before the central shrine. And we have worked on this archaeological site. And in contrast to the accepted assumption, we have found that this very big monastery was part of a larger settlement. And this larger settlement went through several shifts. And these settlements was within a very active alluvial context. The rivers were shifting, And there was also an established assumption that people inhabit an area or landscape which is favorable to them. We are finding evidence of the totally different manner, that people are adapting to the environment which is not very suitable for them. There are shifting of the rivers, there are floods, there are sedimentation, and people are changing their modalities of interactivity with this landscape and with this change of the riverine environment. This is another aspect of Mahastangad, which has not been emphasized in the established research. Mahastangad, any urban center, has a very extensive, is supposed to have a very extensive support zone, which is known as hinterland zone. The main concentration is still on the citadel area, on the urban center area. We are not giving enough importance to the hinterland zone. Recent works have shown that Mahastangad as an urban center had developed an extensive support zone in the surrounding area. And Mahastangad is also on the bank of a river which is very famous, or was famous, during the early historic and early medieval period, which is Korotwa River. And there is a textual source which is famous as Sthal Mahatta, Korotwa Mahatta, and there it has been mentioned about the fame and all the sacred aspect of the Korotwa River in relation to Pundranagar. So this Mahastangad and this hinterland zone is a very interesting example of the human interaction between the floodplain, river, and a zone which is not really a recent floodplain. Mahastangad is located on a landscape which is known as Barin and which was formed during the Pleistocene period. So this human landscape interaction in this riverine territory is a very interesting and problematic issue for those of us who are working in this area. And these are the area in the active delta, which I have already mentioned was identified as not inhabitable before the medieval period, but we are now finding many evidences of this habitation even in the mangrove forest of Sundarban area. The Regional Directorate Office of Government Department of Archaeology and one of the individual who is not an archaeologist by profession, Isme Azam Rizu, he has also worked on his own, and he has also found several archaeological sites in the mangrove forest area which belong to the 9th, 10th century. And these are the area of mangrove forest. And he has also located some of the salt production furnaces, which is possibly a long production tradition in the coastal part of Bangladesh and Bengal. And salt was possibly transported to other areas from this particular zone. And this is a very interesting site, which is now in the river bed, which was discovered by Isme Azam Rizu. And interestingly, when we find these sites, our accepted assumptions are really challenged. We think that people built their structure in an environment which is suitable for them, where a structure or a shrine or a temple or a monastery can be built very easily. But in this zone where river is shifting annually, in this zone where every year we are getting affected by cyclones and other natural disaster, people built many structural structures, and people built habitations in this area even 100, 1200 or 1300 years ago. When there was structure here, the river was not here. And possibly it will be gone within a couple of years. But this area, as these photos represent, was part of the active human habitational world 1000 years ago or 1200 years ago, even before that. And the sites from West Bengal part of India is showing us the attestations of the earlier dates. They are finding early historic sites from this coastal part of Bengal. So if we conduct archaeological survey more intensely and more elaborately in this zone, we can also find archaeological sites and material culture older than what we have already found. And these are the sites, and these are the potteries and other material cultures. And this is a map showing the sites of these southern part of Bangladesh and southern part of West Bengal. So this area is dynamic, is continuously changing, is continuously changing its rivers. The Bay of Bengal is close to this area. It is a tidal zone, and people are inhabiting and adapting to this zone since more than a millennium. So that is an interesting situation we are dealing with in Bangladesh. And these are also the sites. And I will now shift to, I beg your pardon, some of the slides from our works. I'm sharing the screen again. This is our work in the northwestern part of Bangladesh. We are conducting full coverage surveying or non-exclusive surveying, that is very intensive kind of ground survey in northwestern part of Bangladesh, in particularly in the Dinajpur, Joypurhat, and currently in some part of the other regions also. And we have detected archaeological records or data of different kinds in a huge number. Usually during the archaeological survey, which is more popularly known as exploration, we give emphasis on the most valuable or most visible or a very prominent archaeological sites. So when we record those archaeological sites, but we are avoiding these biases. We are giving importance to every kind of archaeological material that can be detected and that can be documented and that can be mapped and that can be photographed. According to our methodology, we are conducting our archaeological survey by taking the Mauja. Mauja is the lowest mappable cadastral unit in Bangladesh, and we are taking each Mauja for surveying and then surveying in every Mauja of every union and upazila. These are the terms we use for subdivisions in Bangladesh. So we have already found in the Dinajpur district more than 1,000 archaeological sites from different periods. This is a part of our study area, and the red areas show the distributions of the settlements. And interestingly, these settlements are mainly characterized by structural remains, that is temples, Brahmanical temples, Buddhist shrines, Buddhist monasteries, and so on. And in the earlier surveys and earlier works, the definition of archaeological data was relatively essentialist and reductionist. Many archaeological sites were neglected. And we have included those aspects of archaeological record in our archaeological survey. And when we have included those aspects of archaeological data in our archaeological framework, then we have found different interpretations which do not necessarily conform to the established interpretations. For example, people dug hundreds of tanks since last 1,500 years. And these tanks were multi-purpose. They used it for irrigation. They used it from ritual purposes. They used it for water, drinking water, and they have also used it for different kind of demarcation of the territories and settlements. And some of these sites clearly show that the idea of settlement, archaeological settlement or human settlement in early medieval period in Bangladesh has to be changed. We have to take into account not only the sculptures, not only the coins, not only the structural remains, we have to take into account the neglected aspects of the material culture in their context, like pottery, distribution of the pottery, like tanks, like other aspects of the science, for example, mud-built modifications or world settlements. All these types of archaeological data have to be incorporated for understanding the human activities in this area in a holistic manner. And we have excavated some of the sites. I will shoot to one or two sites and the stratigraphy. Interestingly, as I have mentioned earlier, the conventional periodization cannot be supported by the stratigraphic periodization. We are following Harris matrix method for our excavation. And as you can see from the periodization, these time frame that we have proposed based on typology of pottery and also some of the radiocarbon dates, calibrated radiocarbon dates that we have found. These periods do not conform to these Pala Sena periods, the notion of periods in terms of ruling dynasties. These periodization also do not conform to the established historic periodization. For example, the state formation, all these other aspects of notions of regional development in this Eastern Indian part, or in this part of undivided, that was undivided Bengal and now in West Bengal and Bangladesh. In this sense, this is a temple, and this stratigraphy suggests that this temple went through several transformations, and in later period, it was transformed into a habitational site. And usually in excavation, we do not give importance to these later aspects of these transformations. And this temple, and these are other temples. So, and I will show other temples also. And this map show you the importance of old tanks in the demarcation of settlements. This particular settlement and there are many other settlements which were demarcated by these clusters of tanks. So tanks have an interesting importance in the human history in Bangladesh. I don't have any idea about the other parts of South Asia, but in Bangladesh, tanks or ponds and water bodies have different kinds of importance. And even if we talk about the other kinds of excavation, we are finding, for example, this site, it is in Beloa, and two copper plate inscriptions were found from here. Here also we are finding continuous use of the earlier structural remains, which was a Brahmanical temple. Then it was transformed into a habitational space. Then it went through transformation in different episodes or phases. And this time frame of this episodic transformation do not conform to this established periodization. That is one of the key feature of our understanding of these archaeological sites in Bangladesh, and which is not very similar to the findings of the other works or findings of the historians' idea about the settlement and the human interpretation in this part of the Indian subcontinent. And these are the photographs of the sites, and you can see the signs of reuse. And this is another very important site in the northernmost, which is known as Tista alluvial fan. Here we have found the evidence of the transformation of a Buddhist edifice into a Brahmanical one. And I will just skip through all the slides because I don't have much time, I guess. So these are the stupas, and then this entire settlement was
Dr. Sen?
transformed. Yes.
Yeah, sorry, you have time, so just you can explain. No worry about the time. You have
Okay.
almost 25-30 minutes with you.
Okay.
So no worries.
Thank you. Thank you. So these stupas were very fascinating. I have already mentioned about the Kutilamura stupa. Here, this big base of the stupas were recovered, but the superstructure was damaged as it is situated just on the bank of a paleo channel of a river. And we have found the charred bone, burnt ashes, and charcoals from this core of these small stupas. Usually, there is a trend of identifying these stupas as the votive stupas, as Nivedan stupas. But the archaeology of Buddhism, which is a very popular term these days, if we accept that term, if we consider the archaeological aspects of the religious objects or religious sites, then the interpretations can be completely different. This is one particular example that these stupas, if we hadn't discovered these charcoal, ash, and other things, and interestingly, this is a very small pot containing charred bone and ashes we have found from that site. So these remains points to the association of the stupas to the funerary practice, which is can be categorized as Sharirika stupas. And this entire site or structure, which was initially a Buddhist shrine associated with several Sharirika stupas, was later transformed or converted into a Brahmanical temple. The findings of the Shiva Linga and the other terracotta plaques and other materials clearly points at the conversion. And this conversion is not only confined to this particular site. There are other sites also where we have found the same evidence of transformation and appropriation and reappropriation of a specific area or specific structure or specific religious shrine in different periods by either religious sects or either religious tradition or by even non-religious activity pattern. And if we show, this is the same site. And another point which is neglected in our conventional archaeological practice is the heterogeneity of archaeological objects. We give prominence to particular selective archaeological objects. For example, among the stone objects, we give importance to the stone made sculptures or idols. Hundreds of sculptures or images have been found from different parts of Bangladesh, and they belong mostly to the early medieval period. And I have already mentioned that Susan Huntington's notion of Palasana school of sculpture, and these sculptures, the same stylistic attributes and the same sculptures are found from eastern part of Bihar and different part of southwestern part of Bangladesh also. So if we consider the stylistic aspects of these sculptures or images, then we can find the extension or expansion of a particular artistic tradition which is not confined to modern territoriality or modern state boundaries. And in fact, an huge area or extensive area was covered by the distribution pattern of this particular type of sculptures. But by doing so, by emphasizing upon the sculptures alone, we are neglecting the other stone objects. most of the structures in Bangladesh are definitely constructed with bricks. But in many cases, stones were used in different parts of the construction. And these stones are petrographically different from the stones by which the sculptures were made. We have tried to work on petrographic aspects of some of these stones. The samples are very small in size. Still, we can hypothesize that these stones were transported from the Chotanagpur Plateau area. These are igneous rocks, mostly granitic granitic in origin, and there is no source of such igneous rock or such stones in Bangladesh or in the southern or northern part of Bangladesh. Even we do not find extensive or huge source of such stones in the northern part of Bangladesh, in Assam and Meghalaya region. So if we imagine the production procedure and the transportation procedure of these particular objects, then our assumptions or our established assumptions can be questioned. Some of the scholars, for example, Professor Claudine Boudzé-Picrot and many other scholars who are art historians and working on these sculptures and iconographic aspects of those sculptures, they have also talked about the mobilities of those sculptures from Bihar to Bengal to Southeast Bengal and to Assam. These mobilities were well-established phenomena. But the mobility of these non-religious objects, such as these stone objects, are not really addressed or discussed in historical narratives or even in the dominant archaeological narratives. So these stone objects can give us ideas about the interesting and complex networks over a long region where rivers were used for transportation of stones. Then they were manufactured in some sites and they were transported to other sites or to construct other settlements. So these are some of the terracotta plaques that we have found, and the same Brahmanical edifice were later converted into a iron manufacturing center. That is very interesting. Earlier it was a Buddhist shrine, then it became a Brahmanical shrine, then after a period of abandonment, it became a part of iron smelting center. So that transformations points at the complexities of human history in this particular landscape. Here there is a small shrine or small Brahmanical temple which was accidentally found by us during our excavation in another site, and we have found the evidence of earthquake even in those structures also. This is another temple that was excavated by our team. It is a Brahmanical temple and possibly a Vishnu temple, a temple dedicated to the Brahmanical goddess, god Vishnu. And we have found very interesting sculptural remains from this archaeological structure. And most importantly, we have found evidences of earthquake and its impact on this structure. The entire structure was collapsed after an earthquake. And we have not only found this impact or evidence only on the structure. Even we have studied some sedimentary section close to the site, and we have found the evidence of earthquake on the sedimentary layers also. So earthquake was a continuous and very effective way of destruction of this structure, which was very imposing during their time of use. And this is for the reason many historians or many archaeologists tend to believe that this part of northwestern part of Bangladesh was devoid of any Brahmanical temples or any large brick built structures. Many scholars, for example, I can mention one of our very respected scholar, Professor Kunal Chakraborty. He has written very empathetically on religious process in this part of Bengal. He has also mentioned that this eastern part of Bengal, including present Bangladesh, did not have many Brahmonical temples. But our survey has revealed that there were hundreds of temples, Brahmonical temples and Buddhist shrines. The problem is that in absence of upstanding monuments like the temples in the, for example, in the southern part of India, or even in the some part of West Bengal and other parts of northern part of India, our temples were ruined, destroyed, and they have been buried under the alluvium. So our survey has also questioned this assumption that there were no structural activities or expansion of Brahmonical structures or Brahmonical religious edifices in this region. Most of the archaeological sites that we have identified in our archaeological survey as structural remains concealed in them. And these structural remains are mostly religious. And human settlement evolved, formed, and developed by taking these religious establishments at their core. This is partly because of this fact that we have not found any habitational remains, like remains of a village or other things. We are finding mainly structural remains of Brahmonical temples, structural remains of Buddhist monasteries, structural remains of other kinds of temples. And most importantly, those temples or those remains have also went through several episodic shift or transformation in their functions. And this is a very interesting image which has been identified by Professor Claudine Buzne-Picot as the incarnation of feminine incarnation of Vishnu from the Sai side. This is another site which is a sign of the transformation and appropriation of earlier structure or earlier religious edifice by the later religious tradition. This site, which is in the northernmost part of Bangladesh, in Birol of Bangladesh, we have found a Buddhist edifice that was appropriated and converted into a Brahmonical temple. And here is also, we are finding the evidence of the earthquake. Possibly the superstructure of this temple were collapsed by an earthquake, and that earthquake can be related hypothetically to the earthquake that has affected the earlier temple, and even it can be correlated with the earthquakes that had affected the Mahasthangar. And we have also tried to find some of the studies which has been done in Nepal, in Assam, in Tibet area on paleoseismology. And there are many recent works on the paleoseismological analysis in the eastern part of Himalayan area. And our hypothesis is corroborated to the findings on the paleoseismology. So they have also tried to date some of the seismic events in the sub-Himalayan zone, and that those dates corroborate to the dates of the archaeological material. So this is very interesting finding that different periods of transformation was affected by the natural events like the earthquake or massive earthquakes, and that affected the religious structures and the settlements. And those earthquakes have also influenced the movement and the change in the channels and rivers and their hydrological pattern. This is the ground plans, composite ground plans of different periods of transformation of this particular temple. And this is, I'm coming to the end of my lecture, possibly. This is the Tista alluvial fan, which is the northern part of Bangladesh, northernmost. And you can see the Nepal, Bhutan, and Assam and in the northern and western part of this Tista alluvial fan. A Tista alluvial fan is basically an geological unit, and it is dominated by the Tista River. And the Tista River is very famous for its change of courses. It has changed its courses several times in history, and it is connected to the Brahmaputra River, which is known in Bangladesh as Jamuna. I have already told. Brahmaputra River has also shifted several times in the Holocene period. Some of the scholars, especially sedimentologists and geomorphologists, who have worked on the geological history of Bangladesh, for example, Professor Godfrey, Professor Kuel, and several scholars from Bangladesh, they have identified that during the last 10,000 years, Brahmaputra River has a tendency to shift from east to west. And Tista has also shifted from several times. So these shifting of rivers have influenced the human activity and human settlements in this zone. And these are the sites. You can see the map of Fresnel, and some of the river identified and mapped by him in the early 18th century. And then you can see parts of the Tista alluvial fan where we have located some of the archaeological sites. And on the western side of this river, this Nagar River, this is part of a little patch of West Bengal, and then the eastern part of Bihar, and then another very famous river for its changes, that is Koshi River, which was known in possibly early medieval period as Kaushiki River. And we have already proposed the Korotwa River. I have already mentioned the name of Korotwa River. That Korotwa River has shifted its courses several times, and the human activity pattern associated with the river has transformed throughout this entire history of shifting. I would like to point at this particular fact of riverine environment for the audience in the other parts of South Asia and other parts of the world, to point at the fact that how rivers and their shifts have influenced the human settlements, human activity, human material culture production, even the structural activities of this part of Bangladesh. This is my intention to point to this particular fact, and this is my possible last slide. These are three world settlements. We are finding many world settlements, or which is popularly known as fortified settlements. These three settlements is sign of how during early medieval period on around 10th, 11th and 12th century, this is Vitargarh in Panchagor, another is in Kantanagar Durgo in northern part, another is in Dharmapalgarh in Nilphamari. All these settlements are fortified or walled. But all these settlements are very interestingly signify the management and control of rivers. These settlements were built and transformed according to the shift of the rivers and according to the shift of the water flow of the rivers. You can see clearly the walls were built by taking the river course into account in three of these settlements. So this is a very interesting and important feature of Bangladesh archaeology, that is the human and landscape interaction. And we cannot just get away from this idea of river and idea of water and idea of ponds. We cannot get away as archaeologists. And we cannot also get away from the very established notion that we have to emphasize only on the big archaeological sites, or we have to emphasize only on the selective archaeological materials. To understand the archaeological works or archaeological history, in a sense, or human activity in the Bangladesh region, we must take into account different kinds of archaeological evidence. And in that way only, we can try to understand the different heterogeneous and complex history of human activity and their material manifestations in this part of Bengal on alluvial terrain. And again, I think I was not very complex in my lecture. And again, I would like to thank the organizers for listening to my brief presentation. And I would like to apologize for any mistakes I have made. And again, I would like to thank my colleagues in Bangladesh, my team members, Government Department of Archaeology, Franco-Bangladesh Mission, and all the people in northwestern part of Bangladesh who are supporting us for the last 20 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sen, for that enlightening lecture which you just delivered. And it was not only talking about the archaeology, but your own analysis about the monuments and the surrounding landscape and the whole contextual study which needs to be done around it. At this point, I request Dr. Suraj Pandit to kindly join us and to say a few words about today's lecture and deliver a vote of thanks. Dr. Suraj Pandit, Head of the Department of Ancient Indian Culture of Sathe College.
Thank you, Anand. This was a wonderful session which we had with Professor Swadhin Sen. Professor, you gave us a brief idea in the beginning about the geography and geology of Bangladesh.
Yes.
And as Professor Dhaudikar has taught us, like the interaction, the dialogue between man and environment, the culture and environment, you emphasize that aspect again. And that made really many things rather clearer to us, because many of us have not seen Bangladesh in our life. We have just heard about the rich cultural heritage and archaeological treasures of Bangladesh. You also have brought not only the methods in archaeology, but the issues which in the excavations and preservations and even explorations of archaeological sites which we face, you all face in the studies which you take up. This was indeed a wonderful session, I will say, very informative, and with a lot of illustrations which could make actually things clear to all of us. Otherwise, it would not have possible for us to visualize anything out of it. So we thank you for accepting our invitation and giving such informative, wonderful session to our participants, our friends who are with us today from different countries, not only from India or South Asia, from entire world. I will say they have joined us to celebrate this event, which is in memory of our own late Professor H.D. Sankaria. So behalf of organizers, that is Center of Archaeology, CEMS, University of Mumbai, Department of Ancient Indian Culture, Sathya College, Mumbai, and Pradhay Heritage Management Consultancies, Pune, I formally thank you for joining us, delivering such a wonderful lecture. Thank you. We are looking